Hello, I'm Scotty, the rocker engineer. This is the third episode of my channel. Welcome everybody. If you are here for the first time, I suggest you to watch the first episode as well to have a full picture what this channel is all about. Today, I will tell my EV story, how the business case to go for one took shape and how did it compare financially to a diesel so far. The pattern I try to follow since the beginning of my car ownership was to buy one at age of 4.5, to avoid the tremendous depreciation of a car in the first few years and keep it till the age of just below 10, from which point the depreciation in percentage to the car value starts to accelerate again and the service and maintenance cost predictably would increase. My Red Gorgeous, which I own since 2016, turned to 9 in the summer of 2021 with slightly under 100k miles on the clock. So it was the time to start thinking about her replacement. So I put together this quick calculation. I immediately realized that the car prices were at least 50% higher compared to back in 2016 when I purchased the car last time. And to be honest, my income growth was not even close to that level. So I looked, what if I bought a 6 years old diesel, a 4 years old diesel, a plug-in hybrid diesel, or went for a company electric car, or even a company plug-in hybrid, or if I could buy a used electric car. The purchase prices decreased with £4,000, which I expected to get for my Red Gorgeous, as the company options start with minus 4,000. The yearly cost column is supposed to cover insurance, road tax, service cost, or benefit in kind in case of the company hybrid. Yearly fuel cost based on 12k miles with a diesel price of 1.8 pound per liter and 2.5p per mile for the electric. In the yearly total, I also included my cash for car allowance. The chart in the right shows the cost progression over 6 years period, and the graph on the left make it easier to see. The shock was how good the company electric car looks like or looked like, you see, and how bad the company plug-in hybrid. To buy a used electric car was more like a dream, but the cost progression looked very impressive. Just for the clarity, the lines on the graph starts from the cost at the end of the first year. What was clear that over 6 years period, no other option came close to the cost effectiveness of a company EV. The company cars leasing period are only 4 years, so I looked at the cost progression for 4 years in the right graph, and the decision was done. So, I ordered a Skoda Enyaq 82 kWh, but not because I liked it. You know, I genuinely don't like SUVs, but that was the only car in my grade which has somewhat healthy range. But the car market was so dynamic and the company car system was so rigid back then that by the time my order would have been approved, we are talking about 1 or 2 weeks here, the 82 kilowatt hour Enyaq disappeared from my grade, leaving only with a choice of 60 kilowatt hour, which I knew wouldn't be sufficient to cover some of my private trips with home charging only, and my job-related trips would be much more difficult. So, eventually, I ended up doing nothing, and yes, in the following year, at 114k on clock, I did buy the bullet in the form of CAN replacement, which I knew was around the corner, and with 2 sensor replacements, which was kinda surprise on my Red Gorgeous. By the summer of 2022, however, the landscape has changed dramatically. My company was about to introduce EV salary sacrifice scheme. The company car offering remained similarly useless than 1 year earlier, and I realized that due to changes in my family, my private mileage was skyrocketing from September 2023. It was the time to take a bit more detailed analysis, utilizing some lessons from the previous Excel. To buy an EV still was a no-go and still made no sense to go for a company hybrid, so I excluded those from the options right from the outset. Similarly to a previous method, the left chart shows the yearly figures, the right chart shows the cost progression starting from the end of the first year, and the graph below make it easier to see. This time around, however, I used 20,000 miles a year. I created this before the salary sacrifice scheme was properly introduced, so for the sake of price orientation, let me say, I checked for both 750 and 900 pound sacrifice. To lose 900 pounds a month, even if it's before tax, is scary, right? But evidently, even with the cheapest diesel option, the overall monthly average cost is pretty similar, even the diesel is a bit higher, as you can see here highlighted with yellow. The orange line on the graph represents the 900 pound salary sacrifice car, and the blue line represents the Vauxhall with 5 years loan. I guess it's clear the salary sacrifice scheme only applicable for fully electric vehicles. In this chart I used 1.75 pound per liter for diesel and 12p per kilowatt hour for EV charge, with an estimated 3 miles per kilowatt hour overall average consumption for the EV. The third worksheet was created when we finally learned the full details of the salary sacrifice scheme. By this time, based on what I learned from the previous Excels and what was on offer, I decided to go for a Polestar 2 long-range single-motor car. It isn't an SUV, but has a 5-door practicality, and then it was class-leading with 341 miles WLTP range. Only the long-range Tesla Model 3 had longer range, but came with a price tag that time, which made it more costly. Not to mention, the interior wasn't my favorite at all. What I wanted to specifically learn from this exercise that what difference does it make if I contract for 20 or 15k miles per year with the Polestar leasing, and what if I remove the trade-in from the Mondeo cost, saying, yes, I put down a 4,000 pound car for it, but I will have some similar value car after 6 years. That is the dashed line. The difference compared to the 20k mile contract Polestar and the dashed line Mondeo option, not huge, but clearly the Mondeo still looked more expensive. The vertical line on the graph represents the salary sacrifice contract length. So, by the end of the third year, it looked I will be better off with the EV almost with 2 grand, you see, and by the end of the second year, pretty much about 1,200 pounds. The 3 years contract length also gave me an opportunity to review the situation more frequently than commit myself for 6 years. So this is how the Polestar 2 found home here. You might ask, how comes that my red Gorgeous is still with the family? You remember, in the first episode, I already told that I just couldn't get hold of a reliable crystal ball. That's why, when I placed the order based on 20k yearly mileage, I didn't know that in 10 months later I would move to a different role and my company mileage would jump from 3k to 12k a year. But at the time of the delivery I already knew it was very much possible. The excess mileage cost on the Polestar would have killed all of my calculation, and to source a company AV which comes with 20k yearly mileage additionally to my salary sacrifice car also looked to be a steep unexpected cost in the form of losing my car allowance, and we wouldn't drive 40k miles a year anyway. So I decided to keep my Red Gorgeous for company journeys only, hoping that she will make enough money in form of personal tax return, which is almost £1,500 a year considering 12,000 miles, to cover her cost and to use my EV exclusively for family travels. So, what the real figures show after 2 years living with an EV. Here are the real numbers. So you might remember from the previous episode that because the EV night charge tariff is less than half of my solar export tariff, my solar power system paid for itself within 2.5 years. Now, in this chart, I didn't take that saving into consideration because that would be like consider the same benefit twice, right? One thing, on the other hand, is correct to consider here. In the column E, the saving due to the fact that I have cheaper night tariff for the whole household because of the EV. So in this chart, the green figures belong to the EV and the black figures to a hypothetical diesel alternative. The diesel fuel cost calculated based on average consumption I saw over many years with my Red Gorgeous and with the actual fuel prices in that particular month. There were some unexpected costs like tire punctures, 2 tire punctures actually, and some ULEZ fee, which would be a cost for me if it was on my diesel, right? Also included some hypothetical service costs based on the odometer. As you can see, by the end of the second year I was better off with £1,500 because of my EV. Pretty much bang on compared to my prediction. Just as a side note, in the right hand chart here, you can see the total mileage of both cars combined since I had my Polestar. It is basically 58k miles, which means if I had decided in buying a 4 years old 40k-ish mile diesel in 2023, I would have a 6 years old car with around 100k on the clock. I wouldn't be such a happy bunny, I can tell you. For sure, today a similar analysis I did 2 years back would bring different figures, and of course, if you drive only 10,000 miles a year, the story is different. I don't want to enter into that discussion just now, because in a few months' time I will need to do a new analysis anyway. The Polestar leasing will run out in June next year, so I will need to start soon to review what the options are like, what the numbers tell, to decide which way to go. That time I will show my calculations here in the channel. There are a few typical objections people keep telling against EVs. One is that recharging is inconvenient and takes ages. Well, I cannot really imagine more convenient way of filling up a car, either battery or gas tank it has, than at home while I'm sleeping in a bed. In fact, over the last 2 years and 36k miles, I should have visited pump stations around 70 times with a diesel, let it be freezing cold in December or boiling hot in June. If I consider only 10 minutes for each pump station visit, that is almost equal to 12 hours, which my EV practically saved for me. Of course, people referring to the public charging. The other objection is that longer journeys with an EV are more expensive than with an ICE car. Generally speaking, it is a fact that public chargers are extremely expensive, in my opinion at least, but will that make those journeys overall more expensive than with an ICE car? I genuinely don't know, but I'm really curious to find out. As I mentioned before, my Red Gorgeous took another assignment, so I will do both my company journeys and family trips with the Polestar. Basically, my private trips will drop back to the level of 8 to 10k a year, and I make around 12k mile job-related travels. I will create episodes for the channel from the most interesting journeys, and for sure I will record in a Model Excel all the trips, so I will be able to show you whether those objections stand the test or those are rather scaremongering. In fact, next week I will be back with a report of a crazy 950-ish mile long tour with my EV and with the results. I hope you will join me that time as well, and yes, don't forget to check out my first episode if you haven't done yet. I hope to see you next week. Until then, have a great time.